Good morning. This is Daniel here from Cop Watch TV, and we are doing our first live. So, one of the things that we're interested in doing here at Cop Watch is answering some of the questions. A lot of times when videos are posted and people do answer or do ask some questions in the comments, but we wanted to make it a situation to where we can interact with our viewers live. So if you have any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer. Also, any of the information from old videos that we did, if there was something that you didn't understand or something that you liked, put it in the chat. I'd be more than happy to go over some of these issues with you. We really want to make this an interactive thing and kind of get to know who our viewers are and the kind of content that you want to see. Because us here at Cop Watch, we want to produce content that you like, that you want to see. So what are some of the things that you would like to see? So we can go ahead and start it off with that. While we're waiting for some comments to come in, if you could put in the chat where you're from. Where is everybody watching from? Welcome. I was waiting for you for 12 hours. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you for waiting for us for 12 hours. We hope that it's worth it. So since you've been waiting so long, if you have any questions, we'd love to answer them, or any topics. While we're waiting for some questions to come in, we can go ahead and talk about some news that's going on in the police world. But looks like we've got people from Illinois, from New York, New Jersey, Indiana, also from the East Mountains. Great, awesome. So one of the issues that's going on in the police world now is obviously the tragedy and the school shooting that happened in Uvalde, Texas. So I know that there are a lot of people who have questions about not just what happened, but also the response from the police officers there. So if there's any questions there, I'd be more than happy to go through those and answer some of those for you. Detain them. I'm not sure what that means. Let's see. Love the content. I like the videos that are between 30 and 60 minutes. That makes sense. That's typically what we do. What brand of flannel is that? That's such a nice question. It's Smith. Thank you. I'm sure that was a joke comment, but thank you. All right. So they asked if I'm a police officer. So a little bit about my background. I do have 15 years experience in law enforcement. I also have a master's degree in criminal justice and a law degree as well. So that's a little bit about my background. I'm really interested in news and politics and current events when it comes to exactly what police officers are going through. So that's one of the interests that I have, is just trying to create content and talk about current issues in policing and in the law enforcement world. So why are the views often cut short at the end? Okay. So let's get into, so while we're waiting for some, I just like the flannel. Well, thank you, my enemy. I appreciate that. Okay, so here's a question from America First. I want to know why the police locked the door to the shooter where he murdered the kids while they saved their own kids. Okay, so that is a really good question. So the first thing that I can say about this incident is we don't know exactly what happened. There's a lot of different conflicting reports. So I think for some of this, it makes the most sense to really reserve judgment until the end. So there has been some reports that the police officers went into the school and saved their own kids and didn't save any other kids. So I know that the police, and we can get into it, but the response from police officers was not, it seems like it was a problematic response from police officers, and that was reported by the Associated Press, from the Daily Wire, CNN, Fox News. Almost everyone in the last couple days had that same report. But the idea that a police officer went in and saved their own kid in the classroom and then left other kids in there, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So Obviously anything is possible, especially in a situation like this. But until we get a little more information, I don't think that was the case. And also when it comes to the door locking, so some of the reports were that when the individual went into the school, he went into the classroom and the door to the classroom was open and he locked the door behind him. So the reports are that the police officers had trouble getting into that classroom and they didn't have the proper breaching tools and that they needed a key from the administration in order to get into that classroom. So it seems like the bad guy had not a hard time getting in, but then once the door was closed, the police officers had an issue getting in. So that's what's at least been reported by multiple news stations when it comes to the door locking and stuff like that. We've heard so many lies so far. The video shows parents begging police to go in and stop the shooter in Uvalde. One woman was handcuffed, another pepper sprayed. Yeah, so, and like I said, I think the response seems like it was problematic. But let's just go through a couple things like that. So if we look at it in the light, most favorable or not favorable to the police officers, that's what it seems like, is that the police officers were all standing outside and they weren't doing what they should have done from the inside, which if you're a parent that is there, I can't even imagine what that would be like, but that's a reasonable thing to think. But I think we also have to realize that at that point, once there were a lot of police officers on scene, you can imagine a situation, let's say, and I'm just making up this number, let's say there were 100 police officers there. You could see a situation where 80 or 90 police officers were trying to engage with the bad guy and were doing the actual work of trying to resolve the situation, and 10 or 20 police officers were outside creating a perimeter. So I just want to put it out there that just because there were police officers on the perimeter making sure that no one else got into the scene, which is reasonable, doesn't mean that there weren't a lot of other police officers inside. So again, we don't know what happened, but I at least wanted to put that possibility out. And I'm not trying to defend the police officers here because, again, it does seem like the response was a problematic response. And just a little bit more about this. So prior to Columbine, that happened in 1999 in Littleton, Colorado, the best practices or the training from police officers and for officers was when there was an active shooter incident that officers don't go in right away, especially if it's only one or two officers, that you wait until there is a team of officers, and it's at that point that you would go in. The thinking behind it and I'm not saying it's correct because it's changed, but the thinking at least at the time was that if you send in one police officer against an active shooter who might have a high-powered weapon, that police officer wouldn't be able to do much good. If that's the case, not only would the police officer die, but there wouldn't be any help to the victims inside who they actually should be helping. So the idea was to get, multiple officers there and then all enter at once to try to end the threat. Well, after Columbine, that changed. And now it's essentially once one or two officers get there and there's gunfire, you enter. That's the training all over the country, and since 1999, I don't know of any other active shooter training that would say anything different. So here at Cop Watch, we have a team that is really good at doing public requests for records. And that's how we get a lot of the body camera and dash cam video from all over the country, is because we have experts who that is what they do. However, as you can imagine, when you're dealing with body cams from different states, some states are better than others. And Texas, unfortunately, isn't great about responding to requests for body cameras. So we do have in a public records request from Texas, like I'm sure a lot of different media outlets do. But Texas is just not one of the states that produces things quickly. But we do have a request and to try to get as much information out as possible. So let's get back to the questions. We have someone, Tegrity Farms. Teachers shouldn't have to be armed, just like the rest of the world where this doesn't happen and gun laws are in place. No, teachers shouldn't have to be armed. But one of the suggestions from people who are trying to solve this issue is that we should arm teachers, and if that were ever, and that's a debate to have, I think, in between each individual community or individual school. But that would be a situation where no one would be forced to be armed. But teachers might be able to opt in after they've taken the proper safety classes and concealed carry courses. Let's see what other questions we got. So again, America First, thank you so much for the comments. Yes, so why didn't they engage? Why did they wait an hour for an off-duty border agent to show up? And so what you just asked, that is the question. Pretty much every media outlet or people who are interested in exactly what happened here, which is pretty much all of us, that's the question. Why did they wait 40 minutes? And I can tell you what's been reported, but obviously I can't tell you if it's true or, more important, if it's reasonable. So what was reported is that when police got there, after bad guy went into the school, the report is that the police officers, 2 officers got there within 4 minutes. The report is that once they got in there, that they were met with gunfire. And at that point, as they were taking rounds, that they called in for more backup at that point. And that's where it's at that point that they're saying, so from when they first got there to when the bad guy was actually killed, they said, we've heard anything from 40 minutes to an hour. So does that mean that, how long were they in the school before they engaged with the shooter? How long were they standing at that door, not able to get in? Is it possible that they went into the school within 10 minutes and it took 20 minutes to open the door? I mean, sure. Or did they wait outside for the entire hour? So these are the questions that everybody needs to have answered. So someone asked about the jurisdiction of Border Patrol. So Border Patrol is obviously a federal agency. And when you have a situation, so typically, Border Patrol doesn't serve normal law enforcement purposes. Now, I've never worked for Border Patrol, and the jurisdiction that I've worked in is several hundred miles from the border. So if we do have anybody from Border Patrol or with specific knowledge about Border Patrol watching the live, if you could put a comment in the chat, I'd be more than happy to defer to a subject matter expert on this. But Border Patrol is in the area. This is close to the border, and when there's a situation like this, and especially something as serious and as dangerous as an active shooter at a school, jurisdiction doesn't matter. Jurisdiction, it doesn't matter. If there's something like this happens and you're a law enforcement officer and you hear the call out for help, everybody goes. So that's what Border Patrol did, and I think it was a member of their SWAT team. Border Patrol did, and I think it was a member of their SWAT team who eventually did the ended the situation. So a question from Tristan Sedora. Do you feel with modern media coverage of police interactions, there will be more deaths of officers due to a timid response from these officers due to a fear of doing the wrong thing? That's an unbelievable question. So what you're kind of getting at is what has been referred to as the Ferguson Effect. So what the Ferguson Effect is, it was, after Michael Brown was killed by a police officer, Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri, back in, I believe, 2013 or 2014. The idea, the idea behind this is that the officer didn't do anything criminal, yet was treated like he had done something criminal. So whether or not we agree with that or not, but does that idea from the police officers, does that put into their minds, well, if I do my job, if I do what I was trained to do, will I be charged? Will I be criminally charged? So, and if police officers are more timid, not to do, at least what it traditionally has been the job of police officers, will that cause police officers to be more timid? And if that's the case, does that put the rest of the community at risk? So that's a debate that people have. And I think that there's reasonable arguments on both sides, but that's a great question. Like I said, that's called the Ferguson Effect is what they've called it. And I think it absolutely does happen. I can't say to what extent. I think it depends upon the jurisdiction that people work in and the leadership of individual police departments. There are somewhere between 700,000 and 800,000 police officers in the United States. So, what might be going on for police officers in Portland might not be the same situation that is going on for police officers in Tupelo, Mississippi. So we have a question from my enemy. What's the protocol for SWAT? When are they called in? Excellent question. So every police department has a different protocol, a different SOP, a different policy for when they call in the SWAT team. But essentially, most departments are going to have individuals who are armed, who are barricaded when there's someone else in danger. Those are the situations that most police departments and most police officers are going to call in a SWAT team. And most police departments or jurisdictions have SWAT teams at least on call 24/7. All right, let's see what other questions we got here. Let's see. Someone said, Margarita Rose, the country is violent, guns are everywhere, nobody is safe. Yeah, so on that, what's been reported is that there are somewhere in and around 400 million guns in the United States, owned by about 100 million different Americans. So if we look at some of the math behind this, it's there's 400 million guns is what's reported, and of those 400 million guns, about 20 million of those are AR-15s. So those AR-15s, there's about 20 million of those that are in circulation somewhere in the country, and that is the best estimate that we have. So also over the last couple days, because obviously anytime there is a tragedy or an incident like this, it talks about, gun control and, people asking on both sides reasonable questions about, well, how can we prevent this in the future? So I think that's a great question to ask, but I think that people have to have some of the facts behind that. So some of the information behind that is, there are approximately 40,000 murders in the country, or 40,000 gun deaths in the country. Of those 40,000 gun deaths, 20,000 of those are suicide. So we have approximately 20,000 gun murders every single year. It's also been reported that 3% of those, so 600, are due to AR-15s. So, AR-15s, what's typically called assault rifle, I guess, is responsible for 3% of the gun deaths, or about 600 people a year. So those are the numbers that we're talking about. So if we think about it, 20 million AR-15s are involved in gun shootings of 600 people. Let's see. All right, so let's see what other kind of questions we have about this incident or any other incident. I know in the last couple weeks we've posted videos about drunk drivers, drunk people on buggies in Amish country. So if you have any questions about that kind of stuff, let us know. One of the topics that we know that you guys really like are fake cops. I think it's one of those things that everybody likes. And what I mean by that is someone who isn't a police officer, who gets dressed up, maybe in some kind of a car, and then acts as a police officer. They're caught on camera. So we know that people really like videos about fake cops. So if anybody has a tip about videos like that we might not be aware of, so if you have that you might not be aware of, if you have information about one of those cases you might be aware of, definitely send us a message, leave us a comment. And like I said, the team that we have doing records, public records requests, we try to get those videos for you all the time because we know that everybody likes that. So we have a question from one of our big time viewers. So James Freeman, he asks, so do you have to be an officer to take out an active shooter? So that's a really good question. I'm not trying to provide any legal advice, obviously, but we can talk about what a hypothetical situation is. So I would absolutely check the laws in your current state, but most states are going to allow individuals to use force or deadly force if there is a reasonable belief that yourself or someone else is in danger. Like I would check any law in your state because every state is going to be a little different. But I think it's reasonable to say. I think it's reasonable to say that if you have a reasonable belief that your life or somebody's life is in danger, that you could take steps in order to preserve life. I feel like that's a reasonable way to answer that question. Obviously, the best thing to do if you see a situation like that is to prior to taking action yourself is to make sure that you call police and at least have police officers, law enforcement, emergency professionals on the way. And a lot of times, even if you're a police officer who's off duty, a lot of times the best thing that you can possibly do is to just be a good witness. Be a good witness and be a good on-the-ground eyes and ears for police officers who are in uniform and on duty to come and handle whatever situation happens to be there. But that is a really, really good question. Oh my gosh, we got some comments about Minneapolis. Let's see. Yeah, so America First, again, thank you. It said, just don't get yourself killed by arriving police officers. That's a really smart comment, and that's pretty much what I said. So you can imagine a situation where you're off duty and maybe you're dressed in a nice flannel shirt. And, you know, if there's an active shooter that's happening or there's some incident where someone is shooting, you can imagine a situation where multiple people are calling police officers, and it's like a game of telephone. So it goes from whoever takes the 911 call to the dispatcher to the officers. And the officers who are responding, how much of that information are they actually getting? And they're not just sitting there, you know, listening in like a perfect, quiet place, getting the information. They're also they're driving. They're trying to run code and operate their vehicles and coordinate with other resources to get there. So you know, if the information, so if you don't want the arriving police officers to mistake you, good person who's trying to help and end, you know, possibly active shooter situation. You don't want the police officers to confuse you for bad guy, if that makes sense. So that is a really good question, a really good comment. The next reasonable question would be, well, how do you determine that? I mean, the best thing, or how do you avoid that? Well, the best thing to do if you happen to find yourself in a situation like that, you know, once you see police officers arrive on scene, make sure if you have a weapon, make sure it's holstered, it's put away. So what you don't want is to arrive in a situation where you're armed with a firearm and it's you're active with it, and police officers are arriving on scene. Because you can imagine a situation how reasonable police officers might make that mistake, and that would be obviously a worst case scenario to happen. Let's see. How do you feel about some of the media reports that are coming out of the LMPD? I'm not sure what that is. So if anyone knows what LMPD is, please let me know. Let's see. So just wait for. Watch out. Okay, so any other questions about this incident? You know, we'd be more than happy to handle, to go through. A lot of people are typing about Jalen Randall, the case by Houston PD. So I try to cover these issues as much as I can, and I'm trying to, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of which case that is. So I tried to stay up to date on these, but if someone could put in a sentence or two on exactly what that case was, I'd be more than happy to go through it and to talk about it. But these are the kinds of things I like. So if you have a request for different cases you would like us to talk about, or maybe you're like, I don't want to listen to this guy talk about an entire case, but I've got this one specific question about this one case. You know, more than happy to answer that as well. You can put that in different chats and different comments on videos, and we'd be more than happy to handle it. What would be nice, what would be ideal is that if we get even prior to us going live, which we're going to do on a more regular basis, is to have questions in advance that people have asked, so we can make sure that we are answering questions, and more importantly, talking about issues and topics that you think are interesting. Let's see. Any comments about the incident where the cop used his taser on a suspect after he was tackled while putting gas in his motorcycle, and the taser set the gas fire, burning 70% of his body? Yeah, absolutely. So I have, I'll do it quick, but I have a whole bunch on that one. Yeah, so that was a situation in Osceola County, Florida. And actually the sheriff there is a really colorful guy. I think his name is Marcus Lopez. And he did a briefing on it. But the long story short on that one is there were people on motorcycles and bikes who were driving in a reckless fashion. People called in, and actually the police helicopter captured a lot of this on their video. So and as the police officers tried to stop the individuals, the one guy, he ran, he didn't stop for police. Then for some reason, he went to a gas station really close to his house. Well, because he was being tracked by the helicopter was able to guide in police officers. So a police officer arrived on scene, and where the guy who he thought, and I think his attorney even confirmed that it was him, was pumping gas. So the police officer tried to arrest him. If you watch the video, and the video is around, it doesn't seem like there was much de-escalation, or it seemed like pretty much as soon as he contacted him, it was pretty much a use of force. Maybe we would call it like an empty hand takedown. And during that takedown, the individual's motorcycle got pushed over while he was pumping gas, so gas was everywhere. Then another police officer showed up and tried to use a taser. The taser was ineffective. And at that point, the first officer who was doing the takedown grabbed the individual's taser, the other officer's taser that he had discarded when it didn't work, and then he used the taser on the individual. When he did, he set himself, two other officers, and the guy that they were arresting on fire. And it's almost an unbelievable thing. So a couple things on this is that, a reasonable question to ask is, well, maybe he didn't know that there was gas. Well, it's on body camera video that prior to deploying the taser that set everybody on fire, that he said on his body camera, shut off the pumps, there's gas. So what the officer was thinking at the time, it's hard to tell, because it wasn't just the individual they were trying to arrest, who now has burns over 70% of his body, but it was also the officer and three other police officers who were set on fire as well. So that police officer who used the taser was actually charged with culpable negligence, which in Florida can be either a misdemeanor or a felony. There's some criticism because the sheriff's department didn't send this case to the attorney general's office or to the state, that they kept it local. So they did charge that officer with a misdemeanor offense for culpable negligence, but it could also be a felony in Florida. And once it gets to the DA's office, I'm not sure how much discretion the DA has in the jurisdiction we're talking about, but I wouldn't be surprised that if the DA decided to up those charges. I know that would happen in a lot of other cities and states. Also, police are losing a lot of their rights. This is why a lot of departments are not being proactive anymore. Yeah, I think that's an absolutely reasonable thing to say. So when we talk about police officers losing their rights, so I think, to be more specific, there has been a push to end qualified immunity, which I can talk about qualified immunity, and I'll do this topic really quick just so people understand what that is. So what qualified immunity is it's essentially a protection for police officers and other government workers, teachers and judges, people who work for public works and sanitation. Now, all government workers have qualified immunity, which means they can't be personally sued unless they violate clearly established constitutional rights. So what that means is that qualified immunity, so having qualified immunity, that doesn't prevent police officers from initiating internal affairs investigations. It doesn't prevent police departments from issuing discipline, firing officers, suspending. It doesn't prevent any of that. Qualified immunity also doesn't prevent the district attorney's office from filing criminal charge against a police officer, or it also doesn't prevent the feds from going after police officers for violations of civil rights. So when people talk about, so I think a lot of people who don't necessarily understand what qualified immunity is think that, well, if we end qualified immunity, it's going to fix some of these issues that we have with police, and it really won't. So even if we go to Colorado, so Colorado ended qualified immunity. I believe for state claims, I'd have to verify that, but I think it's essentially, maybe a police officer would have to pay at most $20,000 to $25,000. Well, what's going to happen is there are insurance companies that are already in talks with police departments. So if this happens, police officers are going to have their insurance providers pay these things, pay these different claims, which if the goal is to change behavior of police, which bad behavior, absolutely, we should find ways to change that. But if the goal is to change or alter or discourage bad behavior from police, ending qualified immunity just really isn't a good tool for that. And those are some of the reasons why. And we can go into more detail on it on a different video if people are interested in that topic. I'm not sure how popular. I think it's interesting, but not sure how many other people do. Also, qualified immunity wasn't a right. It was a protection for bad actors. Yeah, so qualified immunity is, like I said, even in states that have qualified immunity, police officers can be investigated, disciplined, terminated, charged by a local prosecutor, and charged by a the federal government for civil rights violations. All that qualified immunity does is make it so police officers don't personally have to pay for bad acts, I guess. Let's see, what other questions did we have? All right. Okay. So we got a couple more questions. And while we're doing this, I really want to thank the audience who's watching. I know it's Friday during the day, and people have a lot going on. So I really appreciate everybody joining in, being here, and watching us. And definitely give us feedback, because like I said, we want this to be something that is interactive and something that you think that the audience likes and thinks is interesting and worthwhile. So thank you all for being here and for asking just really good questions. A lot better than I thought. Thought they'd be good, but these have been really good questions. Oh my gosh. Let's see if we got any other questions or comments. Let's see. Oh my gosh, Marco Polo's got some interesting comments. Okay, so let's talk about this. I mean, I just don't want to talk about the things that people like about police officers. I think it's also interesting to talk about things that people don't like about police officers, and it's okay to not agree. I think those are the most interesting conversations and discussions are with people who might have a different opinion. I see it as that's how we learn things and get better. So let's read this comment from SMCG. Police officers already don't do anything. We should change the type of standards we have for officers. The kind of people that want to be police aren't the kind of people we want. Okay, so I guess I would just ask for more information about that. Like, what are you talking about specifically? So I know that some of the criticisms is that they want police officers to all have a college degree, or some other people say that all police officers should have to have military experience, or all police officers should have to work in a jail first before they go out on the road. So there's a lot of different criticisms of police officers and the type of people that are being hired. But typically, a hiring process for not all, but most police departments is a written test, a physical test, a psychological test, an interview with a psychologist, a polygraph test, a medical test, and an interview with the leaders of police departments. So that's a typical process to get hired on a police department. It's not the departments that have those processes. it's not an easy process, but there definitely should be a conversation because the police officers work for the community, so the individual community should be the ones to have a lot of say in the type of people that are patrolling their streets and keeping them safe. So if you have any more, S. Mag, I think it was, who made that comment, I think that you have any more information or suggestions, I think everything is reasonable to talk about and discuss. I wanted to throw a question out there. We did a video on a police sergeant who was arrested for driving while intoxicated. So did you guys like the video about the DWI, the DWI video we did with the sergeant that was pretty much arrested by police officers that he knows? So are those the type of videos that you guys like? Did you think that video was good or interesting? Also, did you enjoy the voice of the DWI officer with the video we did about the politician who was arrested for DWI? So we got a lot of comments about this guy's voice. I'm just curious if any of the people who, typically, I don't get comments on my flannel shirts, and we typically don't get comments about people's voices. So, when there are a lot of comments, I think it's just an interesting thing to act. Let's see. Body camera. Let's see. This is body camera. Body cameras don't help until the mute button is not there anymore, and then no pause button, and then charge them for turning off early. Okay, I think that's interesting. So body camera. So obviously, if we go around the country, the last statistic I saw on this is that 80% of all police officers in the United States have body cameras. I think that's great. I think the more body cameras we have, the better. Not just because we like to show those on this channel, but because it not only protects the public, but it protects the police officer, and it's transparency. And really, the best way to get to police and the public, having really, it's more for the public trusting the police, is to have transparency. So I think body cameras are great. I think that every police officer in the country should have them. And there are different companies that issue different body cameras. So, depending upon what company a department goes with, those body cameras might have different features. One of the most popular ones is Axon has body cameras that is very popular. A lot of different police officers, is departments use that, and they actually have the best quality video. So if a lot of the times the video quality is it's as good as it can be from what the type of camera is. But yeah, so most police departments, at least for so it's about, let me think. So it's most police departments, the body camera system that they use, doesn't have a pause button, and they don't have a pause button. Obviously, police officers can turn them on and turn them off. So really what that comes down to is the policy from the police department. So not only is the officer operating the camera, but there are policies saying that police officers, you have to record this, you have to record that. Okay, if it's you and another officer in a car and you're driving to get something to eat, you don't have to record that. Or if you and an officer are talking up to a confidential informant, or if you're at a hospital and there's medical information being given. So typically there are, police departments have, rules and for different situations on when body cameras can be turned off and should be turned off and should be recorded. So I mean, whatever those policies are, police officers absolutely should follow, and they should always err on the side of caution of recording as much as possible. So we are going to be releasing a new video about a nasty pastor later today. So watch out for that. That'll be a great video, but we'll have it out later today about a pastor. So we're going to do a few more minutes, and one more about body cameras. Some cameras come on, and then audio comes on 30 seconds later. Yeah, so the way that body cameras work is if a body camera is completely turned off, then, you have to go through the process of turning it on. But there's kind of like a purgatory. There's like a middle station that most body cameras have. And I think it's called, everyone calls them different. Let's call it buffering mode. So when it's in that mode, the camera is on. But it's not recording. So then when an officer hits the button to turn it on, the video starts immediately. But because the camera was on, you get 30 seconds of video before you hit the button. So the audio starts once the officer turns it on and hits the button, but you get 30 seconds of video before that was there. So the reason for that is you can imagine a situation where an officer, maybe they're just standing at a police station, or they're buying something at a gas station, or in a different situation where it wouldn't be required to have their body camera on, but something happens fast. Something happens quick. Well, if an officer hits the button and turns it on, the audio starts right away, but the video goes back 30 seconds. So that's a great feature to have built in, because then, even though the officer wasn't planning on recording it because they weren't planning on turning on the body camera, it automatically captures 30 seconds up to what initiated the triggering of that body camera. So that is a good feature. But if you ever see, which you're going to see a lot of videos, where the first 30 seconds doesn't have any audio, that's why. That's how it builds. Let's see. Okay, so my friend is a director at Axon Taser, and he loves channels like yours. They bring his company much promotion. That's from Reds General District Court. So Axon is the body camera company that has the best. Before this individual said that, they have the best questions. They have the best quality of video. Someone asked if I was in the military. No, I was not in the military. I graduated my undergrad degree in 2005, and when I was 22, and then a couple months later, I went into the police academy right after that. Let's see. Okay. All right. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. We hope that you enjoyed it. So we would like to do this. More on a regular basis. So definitely leave us comments, suggestions, and most importantly, when it comes to that topic. So any topics you would like us to cover, that's what we want to do. Make sure that you like the channel and subscribe to the channel as well. Share it with your friends. And thank you so much for being part of Cop Watch TV's First Live.